What's the one thing that all great writers have in common? They all learn from their mistakes. Whether you're full-time, part-time, or just starting out, this Great Writers Learn miniseries will give you a behind-the-curtains look at two independent authors and the struggles they've faced along the way. You can shortcut the success of your career by learning from their blunders. Welcome to Great Writers Learn, with your hosts, best-selling authors Daniel Willcocks and John L. Monk.
Hello and welcome to Rights and Wrongs, a Great Writers Learn mini-series in which we explore the behind the scenes of author craft, take a retrospective look at some of the biggest mistakes that we've made, and share fundamental lessons learned so that you can learn from our errors and accelerate your author career. My name's Daniel Willcocks, and with me every single week is the sensational John L. Monk. Hey John, how's it going?
Yeah, pretty well. I was going to say I'm pretty good, but I've been digging a little bit in the garden today, so I'm like really tired.
Nice.
Physically, but my mind is awake and ready to amaze you.
Perfect. I'm excited for that. Because today we're going to be exploring the topic of genre expectations, sharing some of our own personal mistakes and errors that we've learned to avoid by watching others. So John, what are genre expectations?
Well, it's what you think of when you think about the types of genres that you like to read. For example, when I was a kid, I would think I would only read fantasy. And so for me, I almost had a subset of a genre expectation for fantasy. I always had to have a male protagonist. I could not have science fiction mixed in with my fantasy. No romance could be mentioned in the book cover whatsoever. Not that I didn't mind romance when I stumbled upon it, but in my mind, I wasn't looking for that. I preferred wizards over warriors, so you'd always sell a book to me if it had wizards as the main character. And I didn't like first-person narrative because I didn't understand how anybody could remember all those things, which is funny because now I write a lot of first-person. So what's a genre expectation to you? Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's kind of the gist of it. I think genre expectations there, because I was trying to, in doing a little bit of research for this, I was trying to work out where genre expectations come from, because it almost sometimes feels like someone must have set our expectations for what we want to get from a particular genre. And I guess in some ways that's true because you've got the greats that came before us and how they've written different books. But I think there's such a blend of almost like subcategories within the overarching genre that we probably won't go into because that gets a bit too granular. But it's hard to define where it actually came from. But like you say, it's what you expect when you're reading that book. It's that part that keeps pulling you through. It's the fact that you know what the structure of a book will be. It's just the nuances of the story that propel you forward. So, for example, in my case, I write a lot of horror. I know that in 99% of cases, most of the characters aren't going to make it to the end, as much as you love them. And we were just saying off the air, I recently just finished a book in which I so hoped for these four characters to come together and make it to the end, and of course they didn't because the monster slashed the hell out of them. And that's just one of the things that you get with horror. And even now, I feel a little ashamed because I'm a writer who writes horror, I'm a reader who reads horror, and I still get fooled by it, even though I know it's going to happen. But if you can craft characters that are that emotionally intriguing, the people that you can really resonate with, then you get lost in that story and you almost forget what those goalposts are and you get dragged along to the finish.
Sure. Well, let me ask you a question. So you also wrote post-apocalyptic.
Yes.
Now I've written some post-apocalyptic, and I've never thought of it in terms of genre expectations. I just have read a lot in the genre. So in my mind, it was sort of like natural. I wasn't trying to research it and say, I shall now write in this genre. So I don't know if that was the case with you, but have you ever thought, what are the genre expectations of post-apocalyptic?
So I think I'm quite similar in that I don't know where my foundation for post-apocalyptic came from, but I mean, I've played quite a lot of post-apocalyptic games and I've read a few books and things like that. So I knew the tone of what I was trying to get with. Post-apocalyptic tends to have quite a melancholy tone overarching the entire story. Because obviously in most cases, some kind of event has happened that has forced this massive shift in what is essentially the end of the world. And it's about survival in a lot of cases, although less so as the genre has grown. In a lot of cases, you have a male, very grisly protagonist who's fighting tooth and claw. He's normally alone in most cases, or occasionally gets companions, but is reluctant to accept companionship because he's been somewhat hurt in the past. and you spend a lot of time world building and describing the destruction and the effects of whatever cataclysmic event has come before. And I know in the case of your Hell's Children, you had a lot of that world building of everyone collapsing, and that there's definitely a tone. There's an overarching miserable tone to post-apocalyptic.
It's not like a peppy, happy little page turner with a wedding at the end.
No, but that's the thing. People know what they're going into and what to expect. So people who read post-apocalyptic will expect that. And if it is suddenly happy, if you do have this bright wedding and everything turns out wonderful and all these people come skipping out of the yard and there are rainbows, it will turn people off because that's not what they bought that book for. And the thing about genre expectations, I find, is that so many of them are subconscious, particularly for people who are just readers and not writers, that they might not necessarily know why they're turned off, but that will be why. It's because somewhere down the line, they've betrayed what fundamentally they were expecting along the way.
Right. I actually wrote up a list of genre expectations for a couple of different genres that I've written in a little bit or have researched, with the idea of writing maybe under a pen name.
Nice.
Right. So my wife and I were actually talking about writing some cozy mysteries. It's just, I like to write in different things because it keeps me interested in stuff. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to be talking about genre hopping a little bit later.
Oh, yes.
But, yeah. Okay, well, here we go. So for cozy mysteries, what we found out, right, just by researching, and Dorothy, that's my wife, she's read some cozy mysteries, so she's probably better at talking about this than me, but usually the protagonist is a woman. The woman usually has a type of job where she can always leave. The setting is usually a rural, small town, not usually the city, and never in so-called exotic places like Nepal or anything like that. Did you hear my wife sneeze?
I thought that was a dog barking.
Yeah. All right. So, a few more for cozy. They usually have a pet. There's no sex, no gore, and they have some contact with law enforcement. And this is so that the reader, or the main character, can get access to police information.
Nice.
Yeah. So for litrpg, which is the one I've been writing kind of recently, having played games all my life, coming to litrpg, which is a relatively new genre, you really got to watch the tropes because it's a very, very aggressive readership.
Yes.
Very, very opinionated, and they don't like interlopers and stuff like that. So, but going through this, numbers and stats are very important to litrpg. The stats must be used in creative ways that further the plot. For example, my regeneration was so high that I fell in a lava pit, and it would take ages for me to die. Oh, the agony. You see how having a high regeneration rate would cause problems there. Mm-hmm. So the writer would think about that and write it, and the reader would go, oh, that's clever. It kind of fits. You don't break the rules of your own universe without a good reason. Action and humor are generally preferred. One important thing for some is always be in the game world. The more time that you spend in-game, in-world, the more that I've noticed the readership seems to be happy. The other thing I noticed was they make it a big deal to have multiple types of monsters. This was surprising to me, having not read a lot of litrpg. I didn't realize that was a thing. I happen to have a lot of monsters, different types in my stories, and I kept on seeing reviews going, yeah, there's a lot of monsters. And I was like, what an interesting thing to mention. And it turns out that's a good thing. So
fantastic.
Two more, romance and young adult. So young adult, a little quicker. It's usually in the present tense, usually first person, and it's more violent than you would think if you don't already read the genre. So think Hunger Games or my own books, Hell's Children. So we got that. Romance, my one experience with romance was erotica. I worked with 2 successful authors and got a bunch of tips when I wrote this sucker. Pun intended. The one I remember most was the romance readers they really hated cheats in their books. So if you ever wanted to write a romance and you thought you'd write it about a cheat, it's a big turnoff. And I was like, really? I would think that a romance that would be a thing. Like he's with this person now, but they get back together, like the Pina Colada song or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Back
I
it
hate
up.
that.
Fair. Yeah. So how do people go about finding out what tropes, what genre expectations they should be trying to hit when they're approaching their books?
I did a lot of Googling, and I found there wasn't a lot of really concise stuff. My wife found some good stuff on cozies. I don't know where she went, but she's just Googling and stuff like that. You could probably lurk in various groups. I'll tell you right now, for the litrpg genre, if you wanted to write in it, lurking over in the big 10,000 plus strong community on Facebook is a great way to see what drives the readers crazy, good or bad. They're very opinionated. They have lots of very good typing skills about it too. I'll let you know.
I mean, these are gamers.
Yeah, and don't if you do that there. I don't know about other groups, but you're not allowed to crowdsource. So don't go, hey, what do you think about this? That'll get you kicked out. Just go there and lurk. Hit like, comment if you've got a book recommendation. Just general good behavior. I don't know if you can do the same with other genres. And the other idea, I guess, would be just to maybe browse the bookstores and see what's selling, and read them.
Yeah, reading is a massive one that I've got on my list. Read the ones that are good, read the ones that are excelling, that are at the top of the charts. One thing that I also do like dabbling in is reading the ones that aren't so recommended, because it's interesting. I never make it all the way to the end of those books. But number one, it's good to see, without inflating ego, it's good to see why writing can be bad, or how some writers do write poorly but still manage to sell. And at the same time, it's also good to try and work out where along the way, again, you're getting turned off from reading that book, because there might be something fundamentally wrong that you suddenly realize, oh, this book that's leading the charts is delivering X, Y, Z, whereas this has none of that. And there will, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, there will be a lot of subcategories, a load of niches within those particular genres, but generally there'll be those overarching themes that you need to hit. So reading a lot and reading widely. I mean, one of my personal tips is that anytime I'm about to write a particular kind of book, I find a book that's closest to what I want to write, and I'll read that alongside me writing a book. Not so much to steal the idea, but I think, there's an element of almost absorbing some of it through osmosis and being able to channel what someone's done well, so you can try and put that into your book too.
I did a little bit of that with litrpg. Playing games your whole life is it's not good enough. So you also want to read what other people are reading. So I would look at other books and I would go, okay, so this is a well-received book, and they're kind of doing something that I came up with also. And this one is too, and that one is too, from these other people. So I'm not ripping them off, and no one's going to accuse me of it, For example, I was really concerned that I was using the term perks. Like, you have a perk. And you have spells, and you have abilities, and you have perks. And I was like, I hope nobody thinks I'm ripping off this author. And it turned out that author is not. There was a couple other authors that also use perks. And also I had like a main character in my story who was the name of a popular litrpg series, just the name of the series. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I can't possibly use this as the name, So a little research, you're going to get a lot from just researching in general. Let me ask you, what do you think about genre expectations when it comes to like book descriptions?
I think it's good to find the buzzwords and the particular things that fit that genre and try and seed it into your book blurb if you can. I think realistically, people who are looking for a particular type of story, they want to find those clues as early as possible. So going back to our discussion last week, which was covers, if your cover looks like it should do, that's in its own way a genre expectation. And then, I think you can easily study how certain people write their blurbs. And I mean, I've not gone massively in depth on this, but there is a particular formula to a lot of the successful blurbs for particular genres and how they're formatted and the particular things that they say. I haven't got any specific examples, but I have, while writing some of my own blurbs, looked to see what other people have been doing to see if I'm hitting what I should be for readers to switch on and buy the book. And obviously there's genre blending as well, which is where people try and merge the line between two genres. Do you have any particular opinions on genre blending? Is this something that people should or shouldn't avoid?
I would say don't avoid. I mean, I would say avoid it unless you've got a big enough audience that they're just going to follow you anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, the people that like fantasy aren't going to like wizards. The people who are going to like fantasy, or they're not going to like spaceships. The people who like spaceships aren't going to like wizards. From all I've seen and heard from other authors, is genre blending is typically bad, which is interesting because I kind of did some genre blending with my latest litrpg series. There's a strong element of romance in it. You know, it's about a man who his wife dies and he follows into a game looking for her. And so there's something there. But it wasn't like a lot of kissing and hugging and crying and steamy moments or anything. It was nothing kind of like that. It was really more, the wife is more the MacGuffin, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's an element of you can just about toe that line. I think you can get away with certain things as long as you have a predominant genre. I mean, in personal experience, I know that genre blending can be creatively satisfying, but it is dangerous if you're trying to create a marketable product. And there is a reason why particular stories sell. And I know that as an indie author, there are a lot of people who, when they write their book, have this concept they think has never been done before because it blends two genres. And it's not until you actually put that onto the market that you go, okay, no one's looking for this particular book, because you've already got these strong categories that people are looking for subconsciously or consciously, whichever way. So it can be a good way to fill your creative well. So if you know why you're writing, and if one of your reasons to write is literally just to be inspired, to have a cathartic experience, and that can be good. But I think if we're talking about creating a marketable product that will sell, then it's very, very hard to do a genre blending unless you've got the backing of a traditional publishing deal.
Yeah. And by the way, going along with genre blending, if you also don't want to sell books, write a book series like my Jenkins cycle, where there's no discernible genre. I mean, it could be a mystery, it could be romance, it could be action, it could be thriller. It's definitely supernatural, but not in an occult kind of way or anything like that.
Yeah.
Those books don't sell.
No. Another example as well from my own bank is I've got a book, Lazarus, Enter the Dead Space, which it's one of my favorite books I've written because it was one of the first books I've written, but also I really, really enjoyed the story. But at the same time, it trod a line between sort of quite deep science fiction versus post-apocalyptic. And it was all over between the two, and it didn't sell. And yet, like I say, it's one of my creatively most rewarding books, but it just hasn't pushed many copies at all.
And the copies it has pushed, did you get happy readers?
Mixed bag, mostly happy, which is good, but a bit of a mixed bag.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. Any last words before we round up this topic?
Yeah, I would say the last thing is, like anything, the only rule is that there are no rules, or that rules can be broken, but first you got to know them, and a bunch of other platitudes. Don't be a slave to genre convention. Don't let it squeeze the life out of your story. Don't let it sit there and keep you up at night wondering, did I put one kiss too many in my in my post-apocalyptic series or something like that? Was there one wedding too many or something? We're writers, we're artists. We are not paint by the numbers people. These are just, if you're trying to kind of anticipate sales, maybe it's healthy to kind of know about genre expectations. If you want to make money on some books now, so that you can write what you want later. In my case, I'm trying to definitely get out of my job, so I'm a lot more careful with genre conventions than if I was a millionaire. Then I'd be writing stories about drywall that come to life, and
I love it. I'm there.
Handymen. Yeah, kill handymen that come over.
Yes.
Eat them. So anyway, you get the idea.
Yeah, know your why, 100%. So thanks for joining us for this episode. Thank you to Jon for keeping me company. And if you've got your own lessons or cautionary tales regarding genre expectations that you're dying to share, then you can head on over to patreon.com/greatwritersshare, or leave a comment at facebook.com/groups/greatwritersshare, or tag us with #GreatWritersLearn. Join us next time when we'll be exploring the rights and wrongs of marketing for authors. And thank you once again, John L. Monk.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Great Writers Learn mini-series, Rights and Wrongs. If you're looking for even more content created specifically to boost your creative well and accelerate your author career, then head on over to www.patreon.com/greatwritersshare and get involved in the community. Don't forget to also check out the Great Writers Share podcast, where you can eavesdrop on conversations with some of today's most prolific and generous writers as I tease out the tips, tricks, and strategies that they use to make a living from their writing. Just search for Great Writers Share in your podcatcher to get started today. Until next time.